A king who hadn't felt anything in 450 years was brought to his knees by a waitress. Not a princess, not a noblewoman, a waitress. Flat shoes, a crooked name badge. She set down her tray, walked to the center of a room full of immortals, and did the one thing no one in 4 centuries had ever dared. She made him cry. The Eternal Eclipse Gala owned the entire 87th floor of the tallest building in the city. Crystal chandeliers threw crimson light across black marble. The air was cold, the particular cold of immortal skin. Underneath that, something older, something that had no name in any language anyone alive still spoke. Beyond the windows, the city glittered far below. Small, distant, the kind of view designed to remind everyone down there exactly who owned the night, and always had. Inside, the vampire elite moved like dark water. They spoke in low voices about events that unfolded before anyone living could remember, laughed at jokes whose punchlines were centuries old. Every human in the room felt it, that full, quiet weight of how little they mattered here. Aaliyah arrived at 7 o'clock sharp, uniform pressed, sensible flats, tray balanced in one hand. Her name badge sat slightly crooked. The clasp had been bent since her 2nd week, and she'd never gotten around to fixing it. She thought this was just another corporate event, the kind where people in expensive shoes don't look you in the eye, and you smile anyway. Because the rent is due on the 15th, and your mama raised you right. She did not know the truth about this room. She didn't know that her mother, Imani, had spent 23 years quietly making sure a place like this would never find her daughter. She didn't know about the bloodline sleeping in her veins, the flame of eternity. Patient as a grandmother who has learned that the right moment always comes. She didn't know she had been hired tonight for reasons that had nothing to do with catering. And then, Lucien walked in. The music stopped, the way music stops when something in the room suddenly outranks it. Every immortal bowed, like grass flattening in a hard wind. Aaliyah glanced up, just once, purely by instinct. That was her first mistake. His voice reached her before she could look away. "Careful there, little waitress. The way you glide, one might think you're trying to dance among your betters." The laughter that followed had something sharp in it. Aaliyah's hands tightened on the tray. Her jaw set, the way it did when she was deciding not to say the thing she was thinking. She thought of her mother that morning, standing at the apartment door, tucking a small folded note into Aaliyah's coat pocket, her hands trembling just slightly, in a way she was clearly trying to hide. "Just keep your head down, baby. Come home safe." Aaliyah hadn't asked why Imani's hands were shaking. She wished now that she had. She thought of the thing her mother had whispered to her for as long as she could remember, the way other mothers recited bedtime prayers. "Never let them see your fire, baby. Our blood is both a gift and a curse." She had never fully understood what that meant. Standing here now, in this crimson-lit room, she was beginning to. Something moved in her chest. Old. Warm. Not entirely comfortable, the way a banked coal glows when you breathe on it at just the right angle. She set the tray down, and something ancient in her blood whispered back to the laughter, to the cold eyes, to the room that had already decided what she was. Dance. This is your moment. She didn't know yet that her next step would crack a 450-year-old curse wide open. She didn't know the king would weep in front of everyone for the first time since the Renaissance. All she knew in that single burning heartbeat was that she was done being invisible. Drop a comment right now. Just 2 words. Would you? Yes or no? Because what she does next changes everything. Stay with us, because the moment she takes that first step onto the floor, nothing in that ballroom will ever be the same again. The laughter hadn't fully faded when Lucien leaned back into his chair. Carved obsidian. The kind of furniture that belongs in a museum of poor choices. His silver-gray eyes settled on Aaliyah like 2 cold coins dropped flat. Go on. His voice carried easy across 300 listening immortals. Why don't you dance for us? Or is that too much for a mortal like you? The laughter sharpened, crueler this time, more deliberate. Aaliyah knew the stories, the ones that moved through the human staff like folded notes passed under tables. What happened to the ones who stepped wrong at events like this? They didn't come home. Their families received a call from the agency. An incident, a generous settlement, a firm suggestion not to pursue the matter further. She knew all of that, every word of it, and still. Something older than caution moved through her. Dance. This is your moment. She set the tray down on the nearest table, carefully, as if she were setting down every polite silence she had ever chosen, every piece she had kept for a room that never deserved it. Just as her foot touched the open floor, a hand gripped Lucien's arm. Alaric, the king's advisor, lean and pale as January light, the particular rigidity of a man who had spent centuries being useful and nothing warmer than that. He leaned in close. My king. A hiss. Her scent. It's like the old blood mines, the ones we thought we erased. Lucien didn't glance at him. He simply smiled. The smile of a man who has not encountered anything he couldn't control in so long that the possibility no longer registers as real. To him, she was one more fragile human, a thing that could be managed. He had been wrong about things before, but never quite so completely as he was about to be wrong about this. The orchestra shifted without a cue, the way good musicians always read a room, the way old bones read weather. A slow, dangerous waltz. The notes rose up through the marble floor and into Aaliyah's feet like a frequency she had always carried, but never consciously heard before, like a signal her body had been tuned to receive her entire life, finally coming in clear. Memory arrived with the music. She was 10 years old. Suddenly, their apartment, 3 rooms, a slow leak under the kitchen sink, a radiator that banged like an inconsiderate neighbor. Midnight quiet. Her mother was in the center of the living room in her housecoat and old slippers, moving. Not for any audience, not even for herself, really. Moving the way some people breathe, because stopping was simply not an option her body recognized. Never let anyone dim your light, baby, Imani had murmured. Not even fully aware Aaliyah was watching from the hallway in her sock feet. Even if they own the night. Back then, Aaliyah had filed it away the way children file away things they don't yet have the life experience to decode. She understood it now. Every syllable of it. She closed her eyes. One single heartbeat of stillness. The kind that comes just before something irreversible. And then she began. Her first steps were soft, almost tentative. The way a porch swing barely stirs until someone sits down and surrenders their full weight to it. Then the music swelled, and something shifted that could not be unshifted. Her braids swept like dark fire. Her movement carried the kind of power that has less to do with technique than with truth. The kind of truth that doesn't ask the room's permission before it fills it. Her arms cut through the crimson air as though she were inscribing something permanent. Every step landed like a pulse, steady, undeniable, in a space that had not heard one in a very long time. The mocking expressions froze, one by one, then all of them, like candles going out in reverse order. An ancient vampire nobleman pressed a hand to his chest. A tear moved down his face. He looked genuinely startled by it. The expression of a man who reaches into a coat pocket for his keys and finds, instead, a letter from someone he had stopped expecting to hear from. Nearby, a noblewoman let her glass slip from her fingers. It shattered on the marble. No one moved to address it. No one was thinking about the floor. She makes my dead heart remember what living felt like, the woman whispered, so quietly it was barely sound at all. Across the room, an elder who had not spoken to anyone in decades turned slowly toward the rhythm of Aaliyah's movement. Something crossed his ancient face, not quite recognition, but its outline. The shape of something he had once known and lost so gradually he had stopped noticing the loss. Lucien's expression changed. He sat forward, slowly, with a quality of attention that belongs to a man encountering something that doesn't fit his existing map of the world. His silver eyes narrowed. The easy contempt that had lived in them since the moment Aaliyah entered the room was simply gone. In its place was something he had no good name for. Not hunger, or not only that. Something underneath hunger. Something that predated his immortality. That had belonged to the man he was before all of this, before the centuries and the cold and the long, careful forgetting. It felt uncomfortably, almost embarrassingly, close to longing. He wanted to contain whatever threat she represented, to eliminate it before it could grow. That was the rational response. He recognized it clearly, but the way she moved made him ache. In a place he had been certain was no longer capable of aching. To protect her instead. The contradiction sat in his chest like a splinter. She is going to be a problem, he thought, and the thought alarmed him in a way nothing had in 4 centuries. And some part of me is relieved. No one in the room noticed. No one human, in any case. That with every turn, a faint golden light was rising in Aaliyah's eyes. Slow and steady, the way dawn builds before anyone is awake to see it start. No one noticed that deep within Lucien's chest, an ancient curse that had sealed his emotions for 450 years had begun. Slowly, structurally, irreversibly, to fracture. Stay with us, because what no one in that room understood yet is that every step she took was waking something up that was never meant to be woken. And in about 60 seconds, this entire night is going to change direction. The waltz surged. Not the polished, rehearsed kind of surge. Not the kind that happens when a performance is going exactly as planned. This was the other kind. The kind that happens when the music stops obeying the conductor and starts obeying something else entirely. Bows flew, shoulders lifted. The orchestra played as though something outside themselves was moving through their hands, and not one of them tried to stop it. Aaliyah moved with it, into it. Her legs extended into long, precise lines that cut through the air like well-chosen words. Nothing wasted, everything intentional. Her back arched with the kind of posture that doesn't come from training alone, but from a lifetime of carrying weight and choosing one morning to carry it differently. Her turns sent faint golden sparks drifting outward, invisible to human eyes, but not to the 300 immortal pairs fixed on her from every corner of the room. Those eyes were wide now. That was new. The temperature in the ballroom rose. Barely at first. The difference between a house in deep January and one in late February. Not warm yet, but less cold, as though the marble floors were remembering, reluctantly, what sunlight felt like, as though the building itself had been holding its breath for a long time and was only now beginning to let go. Aaliyah felt it in her palms, her fingertips, the back of her neck beneath her braids, a warmth that moved outward from her center. Familiar, in the way that things you were born with are always familiar even when you can't name them. She didn't understand it yet. Her blood did. Her blood had understood for a long time. It had simply been waiting for this room, this music, this moment, the precise conditions under which it no longer had any reason to stay quiet. Then it happened. Every vampire in the room felt something. Not hunger, not the instinctive awareness of a nearby heartbeat that every immortal carries, the way a compass always knows north. Something else. Something most of them had surrendered so long ago they had stopped noticing its absence. The way you stop noticing a missing step on the back porch after enough years of stepping over the gap. Grief arrived first, sudden and sourceless. The way grief comes when you've convinced yourself you were finished with it. Then joy. Not the manageable kind, but the large, inconvenient variety that has no specific cause and needs none. Then longing, deep and disorienting, rising through 4 centuries of careful numbness like groundwater rising through dry soil after a long rain. The noblewoman who had dropped her glass was weeping without restraint now. Not the composed, dignified kind. The honest kind. The kind a woman produces alone in her car after a church service when the final hymn turns out to be the one her mother always loved. And she hadn't braced herself. "She makes us feel alive again," the woman said, and her voice broke on the last word, and no one in the room looked at her sideways for it. An elder vampire, ancient even by the standards of this room. The kind of old that predated indoor plumbing and had outlived every language he was born speaking. He smiled, slowly, carefully, testing a muscle he hadn't used in centuries. The way you test a chair you're not sure will hold your weight. He had not smiled since the Renaissance. His face looked briefly puzzled by the sensation, and then quietly, deeply glad. Aaliyah's eyes ignited, a soft gold glow, steady and warm, spreading from her irises outward like the first stripe of color on a morning horizon. She didn't notice. She was somewhere between memory and momentum, between her mother's midnight apartment and this black marble floor, between the girl she had been 12 months ago and whoever she was in the process of becoming right now, in real time, in front of everyone. She was just dancing. She was, for the first time in her life, simply and entirely herself. The applause began. Not the performative kind, not the scattered, going through the motions variety that people produce when they're clapping for obligation rather than feeling. This was 300 immortals rising to their feet, the sound enormous, genuine in a way that nothing in that ballroom had been genuine in longer than anyone present could accurately calculate. Lucien stood. He rose slowly, with the reluctant quality of a man whose body has decided something before his mind has fully agreed. His silver-gray eyes were fixed on Aaliyah, stripped of every layer of distance and performance he had spent centuries perfecting. For the first time in the memory of everyone present, his voice arrived without armor. "You." A pause. He swallowed. His throat moved. "You possess something I did not expect, mortal." He extended his hand. A small gesture, unhurried, precise. The hand of a man accustomed to giving commands rather than invitations, aware of the difference. But it trembled, faintly, the way a flame moves in a draft that could go either direction. No one who witnessed that trembling ever forgot it. Aaliyah looked at his hand. She thought of her mother saying, "Never let them see your fire." She thought of the tray she had set down. She thought of the way her own hands had been shaking 20 minutes ago, and the fact that they were completely steady now, which surprised her more than anything else that had happened tonight. She took his hand. Their skin touched. A spark passed between them. Sharp, golden, immediate. Both of them drew back a half-inch, before something that operated below the level of conscious thought pulled them forward again. Lucien's pupils expanded. The silver of his eyes shifted. The way light on still water changes when a cloud clears and the sun comes through directly. For one heartbeat, he looked almost human. Inside him, 4 centuries of carefully maintained distance broke apart. Not gently, the way ice on a river breaks in March. All at once, with sound, sending fractures racing outward in every direction faster than you can track them. The cold, organized certainty with which he had assessed Aaliyah. Threat, contain, eliminate. It dissolved against something that had no interest in his categories and no intention of fitting into them. And then, in front of the entire court, a single tear traced a slow line down Lucien's face. The silence that followed was heavier than the applause. The first tear in 450 years. Someone near the back of the room forgot to breathe. Several people forgot to pretend they hadn't seen it. Lucien did not wipe it away. He let it fall. Perhaps because he didn't know yet what it meant. Perhaps because some part of him, the part that was cracking open, already understood that wiping it away would have been one lie too many. Beneath the weight of that moment, something had completed itself. A blood bond, ancient and irreversible, had fully activated between them. Her flame meeting his fracture. The prophecy that had been waiting 23 years, finally arriving at its appointed hour. Lucien understood exactly who she was. The one the old texts had warned him about. The one whose entire family line he had ordered erased before she was old enough to know her own name. And she was standing in his ballroom with golden fire in her eyes, holding his hand. And the most alarming thing, the thing he could not reason his way around, was that he did not want to let go. He pulled her closer, not forcefully, with care. The way you handle something you have only just recognized as irreplaceable. The way a woman lifts her mother's favorite cup from the estate sale table after the service. Understanding for the first time that nothing in any shop will ever feel quite the same in her hands. His voice arrived low, meant for her alone. Wait, there is more to you than dance. It wasn't admiration. It was the sound of a man taking an accounting of something he is about to be held responsible for. Aaliyah went very still. The specific stillness that arrives when a sound in the dark turns out to be coming from inside the house. Then the vision struck them both. It moved through the blood bond between them the way a letter arrives after years of sitting in a locked drawer, without warning, without preamble, carrying only the full, unavoidable weight of the truth it has been holding. No softening, no preparation, just, here is what is real. Aaliyah saw her lineage with the strange vertigo of recognizing your own face in a very old photograph. Woman after woman, stretching back through generations she had no names for, surviving, carrying, keeping something alive through circumstances that should have extinguished it entirely. The flame of eternity, patient, ancient, passed through a line of women who had endured the unendurable and chosen, quietly and without witnesses, not to let it go out. A bloodline with a single extraordinary property. It could restore genuine humanity to vampires, the full weight of emotion, conscience, and moral feeling. Or, if released in uncontrolled grief or fury, it could accelerate the deterioration of immortal biology until nothing remained but memory. The court understood this immediately. The collective recoil moved through 300 immortals the way a shiver moves through a congregation when the preacher says the uncomfortable true thing on a Sunday morning. Starting at the front, traveling to the back, leaving no one untouched. Not one of them spoke. They were all, in that moment, quietly afraid of a 24-year-old woman in sensible flats. Lucian released her hand. He didn't step away. He stood exactly where he was, which was somehow more significant, like a man who has chosen to remain in a difficult room because he has decided he has no right to leave it. His voice, when it came, had none of its usual architecture. No distance, no management. Your mother, Imani. A pause that had real weight in it. She was a servant in my household. I held her contract for 11 years. Aaliyah's breath shifted. 23 years ago, I was made aware of a prophecy. It named a bloodline, the flame of eternity, as a threat to the immortal order. I ordered the elimination of every known member of that line. He met her eyes. I did not know Imani had a daughter. She had hidden you completely. When I found out years later, you had already disappeared into the city. I chose not to pursue it. A beat. That choice did not come from mercy. It came from calculation. I want you to know the difference. The silence in the room was absolute. Aaliyah stood inside that silence and let the information move through her the way cold water moves through a person, reaching every part of you, changing the temperature of everything it touches. Her mother's caution, the agencies Imani had steered her toward, always slightly off the main circuit. The television interview Imani had muted without explanation. A vampire in a well-cut suit discussing coexistence in a voice so polished it almost sounded sincere. The cedar chest in the back of the closet that was always locked. Always not yet. Always accompanied by Imani's particular expression that meant the conversation was over before it began. The note tucked into her coat pocket that morning. Just keep your head down, baby. Come home safe. And Imani's hands, trembling in a way she was clearly trying to conceal. She knew. Aaliyah understood. She knew exactly what room I was walking into. She couldn't stop it. She couldn't explain it. So she sent me with a note in my pocket because it was the only thing she still had to give. 23 years of a mother's love, arranged entirely around a secret. Not because Imani was afraid, because she understood that some dangers cannot be outrun, only quietly managed, one careful day at a time, for as long as you can hold. Aaliyah could have come undone in that moment. She had every right to. Instead, she straightened. One breath, shoulders settling. The quiet internal rearrangement of a woman who has received devastating news and decided, without announcement, without drama, that it will not be the final word. She stepped back. One step. Clean and deliberate. Her eyes held their gold. Then tonight, she said. And the quiet was not smallness, but precision. Each word chosen and placed with full awareness of its weight. I dance for every person you silenced, for every life that was told it was too small, too inconvenient, too dangerous to be allowed to exist. She turned to the floor, and she danced again, this time without discovery in it. this time with full knowledge of who she was, what she carried, what it had cost the woman who loved her most to keep that knowledge from her for 23 years. Every step landed with intention. Every turn sent golden light spreading across the marble in slow, widening rings. The way morning light crosses a kitchen table, familiar, unhurried, and absolutely certain of its right to be there. The vampires in the room responded with their bodies before their minds could intervene. Some pressed hands to their chests, some wept without deciding to. The elder who had smiled for the first time in centuries sat down heavily, like a man whose legs had simply concluded they were done performing the function of standing. Lucian sank back into his throne. He pressed one hand to his sternum. His eyes did not leave her. What moved through him was not the comfortable, distant guilt of a powerful person acknowledging an error from a safe remove. It was the real kind. The sacred, structural kind that tears through a person like light through an old curtain, leaving everything permanently different on the other side. "You are going to undo everything I built," he said quietly. Not a threat, not even a lament. Something closer to the first honest sentence a man has spoken in a very long time. "And I think I want you to." The curse was fracturing faster now. Every step she took broke another piece of it loose. The question that sat in the room, in every watching, breathing, quietly shattered immortal heart, was whether the king would choose the woman who had cracked him open, or the order he had maintained for 4.5 centuries, and whether after tonight he even believed those were two different things anymore. Don't go anywhere, because in the next segment, Aaliyah has a choice that will define everything. Accept the power being handed to her, or demand something far more radical. Her final turn arrived without announcement, the way the last hymn at a long service arrives. Inevitable, already present before anyone calls for it, the congregation rising before the first note sounds. A single blazing pirouette, her braids swept outward in a clean arc, catching the crimson light and returning it golden. The glow in her eyes expanded in one quiet, enormous exhale, flooding the ballroom with warmth that had no source the room could identify. Not the chandeliers, not the windows, not anything installed or purchased or arranged by anyone who had planned this evening. It came from her. It had always come from her. The curse of the void heart broke, not loudly, with a silence. The specific, weighty silence of something that has been wrong for a very long time finally being corrected. Like a door that has been stuck for years suddenly swinging open on its hinges and letting the air through. Lucian dropped to one knee. 300 immortals witnessed it. Not one of them made a sound. He knelt on the black marble with his head bowed, one hand pressed flat against the cold floor, the other against his chest. His jaw was set, not with resistance. The resistance had gone with the curse, but with the effort of containing something that had been sealed for centuries and was not entirely sure, yet, how to exist outside of its container. When he raised his eyes, they held things that had not lived in them for 4.5 centuries. Guilt, still raw. Gratitude, large and unpolished. And something fragile and new. Humanity, just enough of it, just beginning. That made him look, for the first time, like a person rather than an institution. "You have undone me." His voice was barely sound, and I have never been more grateful. One long beat of silence. Then the eldest member of the Vampire Council rose from his seat at the back of the room, deliberately, ceremonially. Then another elder rose, then the next, in a slow wave that moved from the rear of the ballroom forward. And each one, as they gained their feet, extended both hands toward Aaliyah, in a formal gesture that had not been performed in living memory. The offer required no words. It was legible to everyone in the room. Immortality, the throne, the authority to govern a civilization that had, 30 minutes ago, been laughing at the way she walked. All of it. Hers. If she reached for it. Aaliyah looked at those extended hands. She looked at the faces above them. The same faces that had worn contempt like fine jewelry when she first walked in. And then she looked at Lucienne, still kneeling, watching her with eyes that were changed and still watchful, and still, she noted, genuinely uncertain what she was about to do. She did not reach for the crown. She drew one slow breath, the kind that precedes the sentence a person has been working their whole life toward, without knowing that's what they were doing. I don't want a throne built on fear. Quietly, with the precision of someone who understands exactly how much weight each word is carrying. I want real change. Humans are not resources. They are not background. They are people. And your society will begin treating them as such, with formal protections and genuine accountability, starting now. She held the silence for a moment. Or I will find another use for what runs in my blood. The choice belongs to you. No one moved. Then Lucienne, still kneeling, looked up at her with an expression she hadn't seen on him yet. Conviction. The kind that only comes after a person has looked clearly at themselves for the first time in a long while and decided they don't like what they see and are going to do something about it. His voice was unsteady for the first time in 4 centuries. Then let us build something better, he said, together, starting tonight. The applause that followed was not the cold, managed kind that a court produces to signal loyalty to whoever currently holds the most power. It was messier than that, more human than that. The sound of 300 immortals attempting, clumsily, imperfectly, some of them visibly surprised by their own participation, to feel something as unfamiliar as hope. Several of them looked mildly alarmed by the sensation. That detail, Aaliyah would say later, was the one that stayed with her longest. Not the applause itself, but the bewilderment on the faces of people experiencing sincerity after a very long absence. In the weeks that followed, the changes were real and specific. Human workers in vampire-run establishments received formal written agreements, not customs, not courtesies, but binding terms with named consequences for violations. Oversight councils, with human members, were established for the first time. Aaliyah performed on stages arranged at the careful edges of both worlds. Intimate venues where humans and vampires could occupy the same room without the old hierarchy governing who mattered. Her dancing carried meaning the way old quilts carried maps. Visible to those who knew how to look, invisible to those who didn't, quietly doing its work regardless. Lucienne remained close. He was not simple, not suddenly uncomplicated. 4 centuries of habit does not dissolve in a single night, however remarkable the night. He made errors. He corrected them with less grace than he would have liked, and more honesty than he was accustomed to. He was learning. At 450 years old. The particular discipline of sitting with discomfort instead of eliminating it. Between them, something grew, cautious and real, and threaded with the full weight of their history. His guilt, her grief, the complicated tenderness of 2 people choosing, in full awareness of all the reasons not to move toward each other anyway. It was not simple, the best things rarely are. And then, one evening, a raven arrived at the balcony window. Black wings, silent landing. A letter sealed in dark wax bearing a crest neither of them recognized. Intricate and old. The mark of people who had been patient for a very long time and had recently decided their patience was finished. Aaliyah opened it. One line, written in deep red ink, in a hand that was precise and entirely certain of itself. The flame will be extinguished before the next full moon. The old order does not fall so easily. Lucien's jaw tightened. She heard the small, controlled exhale through his nose. The sound of a man recalibrating. Aaliyah folded the letter once, carefully, slipped it into her pocket. Then she looked out at the city below. Her city, she thought, with a quiet certainty she hadn't felt before tonight, and turned to him. Then we keep going, she said simply. Together. Stay with us, because what Aaliyah discovers in the final act about what her mother left behind in that locked cedar chest will change everything you thought you understood about this story. Dawn came gradually to the 87th floor. It always does. At that height. The light doesn't arrive the way it does at street level, all at once, landing on the sidewalk and the parked cars and the neighbor's garden hose left out since Tuesday. Up here, it builds slowly from the horizon, pale and considered, turning the city below from a scatter of electric lights into something that begins, little by little, to look like a life worth the trouble of living. Aaliyah stood on the balcony in the early quiet. Someone had found her a wrap, deep blue, soft as well-washed flannel. She had it around her shoulders the way her grandmother used to pull a kitchen towel over her shoulders when she was reading and didn't want to get up for a proper blanket. Her braids were looser now. Her feet were bare on the cold stone. She looked, in that moment, like any young woman standing in the first light of a new morning, trying to take the measure of who she is now that the person she was yesterday has changed shape. She was thinking about her mother. She was always thinking about her mother. She thought about Imani in their small apartment kitchen. Sunday mornings, the radio low, moving like the music was continuous and the dishwashing was simply happening inside it. She thought about every steering, every gentle redirection, every opportunity that had quietly not materialized in ways that, looking back, had Imani's fingerprints all over them. Not fear, not smallness, love, operating at the edge of its own limits, doing the only thing it could with the information it was carrying alone. There is a grief that arrives only after you understand the full dimensions of what someone did for you. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It settles like snow, the kind that accumulates while you sleep, and you only understand how deep it's gotten when you open the back door in the morning and have to lean your whole weight against it to get it to move. Aaliyah let that grief sit with her. She didn't redirect it or set it aside for later. She let it occupy the space it needed. And she stayed with it. The way you stay with something true, even when it isn't comfortable. And alongside it. Not instead of it, but alongside. The way the best and the hardest feelings have always coexisted in anyone who has lived long enough. Something else. Something that doesn't reduce to a single word. The way the feelings that matter most tend to resist reduction. Not quite pride, not quite gratitude. The particular feeling of a person who has finally understood what she has been carrying and has decided, with full awareness of the weight, to carry it forward. For you, Mama, every single step. She had no idea, standing there in the early light, that 3 weeks from now she would find the cedar chest finally unlocked and waiting in the back of the closet. that inside it there would be a letter addressed in her mother's handwriting, written years ago, explaining everything Imani had never found the words to say out loud. That what was written in that letter would keep her awake at 3 in the morning for months, not from sorrow, but from the staggering, almost unbearable gratitude of understanding, finally and completely, how much she had always been loved. But that was still to come. Right now, there was just the dawn, and the quiet, and Lucien, appearing behind her without a sound. He was different in the morning light than he had been in the ballroom's crimson dark. The elaborate stillness he had worn for centuries, the impeccable surface of a man who had not needed anyone close enough to question whether he was fine. It was gone. In its place was something more exposed and more honest, the plain, unpracticed quiet of a person who has lost their longest-running performance and is finding out in real time what exists underneath it. His eyes were softer, still attentive. She was not naive enough to imagine that 450 years of instinct had been fully replaced by sentiment overnight, but held now by something she recognized as genuine respect, the kind that has been earned through honest reckoning rather than performance. He didn't speak immediately. They stood together and watched the light work its way across the city. "What do we do now?" Aaliyah asked. Not fearfully, just honestly. The way you ask a question when you already know it won't have a clean answer, and you're asking it because not asking it would be its own kind of avoidance. He considered the question the way it deserved to be considered. "We build something better," he said, slowly, imperfectly, knowing it could fail. She nodded. It reminded her of the first morning her grandmother had taught her to make pie crust at the big kitchen table with the wobbly leg. Gran in her apron, flour on her forearms, entirely untroubled by the chaos of the process. "You will ruin the first 3 batches," Gran had said cheerfully, handing Aaliyah the old wooden rolling pin. "And then your hands will learn to trust themselves." It was the most practically useful piece of wisdom she had ever received, and it turned out to apply to considerably more than pastry. "Then we start today," Aaliyah said. "Today," he agreed. The raven arrived without warning, silent, black-winged, landing on the balcony railing with the calm precision of a creature that has delivered difficult messages before and has no anxiety about doing it again. The letter in its beak was sealed in dark wax. Aaliyah opened it. One line, written in ink the color of old rust. The handwriting unhurried and absolutely certain. "The flame will be extinguished before the next full moon. The old order does not fall so easily." Lucien's jaw tightened. She felt it without looking at him. The small, controlled adjustment of a man who has received bad news before and knows how to meet it. Aaliyah folded the letter once, tucked it into the pocket of her blue wrap, looked out at the city that was fully light now, all the way to the edges. Then she turned to him. "Then we dance again," she said quietly. "This time, together." His eyes held hers, and in them, below the history, below the centuries, below everything complicated and unresolved that existed between them and would continue to require their honest attention for a long time, something steady looked back at her, something that had made a decision, something that intended to keep it. The world Aaliyah had walked into the previous evening, the one where humans kept their eyes down and hoped that being invisible was the same thing as being protected. That world had shifted. Not entirely. Not without the long, unglamorous work of building something new out of the wreckage of something old. Not without opposition from people who had benefited from the old arrangement and would not release it quietly. But the direction had changed. Because one woman had set down a tray, had heard something ancient stir awake in her, had danced, not for approval, not for survival, not for any audience at all, but because it was the most honest thing she knew how to do. And that, as it turned out, was enough to begin. This story teaches us something specific. Not a slogan, but a practice. If you have been the person who kept the household running, raised the children, held the family together, and somewhere along the way stopped asking what you yourself still wanted, this week, try one small thing. Pull out the recipe box that hasn't been opened since the kids moved to Denver. Find the card your mother wrote you in 1987, the one tucked under the rubber band. Sit with it at the kitchen table with your coffee, not to be sad, but to remember that the woman who received that card was always worth more than the room gave her credit for. Aaliyah's fire was real before anyone in that ballroom acknowledged it. So was yours. You don't need a throne, you just need to set the tray down. One more time. And take up the space that was always yours. This vampire tale was born from a real human soul, full of emotion, contradiction, and longing. I was merely a companion who helped arrange the words to be as beautiful and clear as possible. That's why you'll find it not only terrifying, but also very human.